All right, here in Potomac, Maryland, I have the Tecsun S8800, which is the high sensitivity receiver that Tecsun came out with a couple of years ago. It's gone through some changes to correct issues such as birdies in the circuitry, and I thought I'd take it out here in the backyard on the deck to do a quick run-through of the features of the radio. First of all, I'm going to be using the remote control for the S8800, which is beautifully done and executed with all of the controls that are on the radio, plus of course the keypad are on this remote control. So basically you don't even have to touch the radio itself. You can power on, you can change frequencies, bands, adjust bandwidth, upper lower sideband, etc. using the remote control, volume up and down, scan capabilities, sleep functions, and the display using this fine remote. All right, so I've just powered on the S8800 with the remote control. Here's the volume, here's bass and treble tone controls. The band select knob is here, fine tuning down here on the radio. Plus you have the automatic tuning ATS control here, and memory as well as the long wave on or off here. Alarm, time, display, VFO or memory control, AM normal, FM stereo, 910 kilohertz selection, and upper lower sideband. But again, I'll be using the remote control. It's just after 20 hours GMT here in Maryland. Conditions today are not the greatest, but one of the stations that has been coming in very nicely to the joy of many SWLs and DXers is Voice of Nigeria, 9690, 9689.9 or so. And here's an example of the reception of Voice of Nigeria on the S8800. I'm going to cycle through the bandwidth selections, 4 kilohertz, 6 kilohertz, 4, 3, 2.3, back to 3, back up to 4, back up to 6, and so forth. So as you can see, one of the first features that just is a standout matter in this receiver are the selectivity options, controllable from the radio or the remote control. Having these kind of DSP selectivity options on a radio these days has become pretty much par for the course, except that with the radio combined with this superb sound out of the Tecsun speaker, it's even more wonderful. Again, volume up on Voice of Nigeria, and I'll cycle through the selectivity positions. Now, just for some comparisons, since we have this Tecsun radio, which is arguably one of the most sensitive, if not the most sensitive portable on the market these days, and the market these days does not consist of many portables at all, and most of them are Tecsun or DGen or other receivers. I brought back an oldie but goodie for this comparison, which is the Panasonic RF-B65, which is to the left of the Tecsun. Now, the RF-B65's reputation for being one of the most sensitive receivers, portables ever made, is well known. This portable radio is absolutely, without a doubt, one of the most sensitive receivers I have ever owned and used. This particular one is pretty much brand new in the box, right out of the box behind it. And I wanted to give a comparison of Voice of Nigeria. You heard it on the Tecsun. I'll turn up the volume again. I've got it tuned to Voice of Nigeria on the Panasonic, and you'll have an example of how wonderfully sensitive the Panasonic is, even though it's a very old receiver. Going up to 9690 here, just stand by. And we're going to go back to the 8800. The Panasonic, although arguably perhaps just as sensitive as the Tecsun, although the Tecsun is a triple conversion receiver and the Panasonic is again decades old technology, the audibility is so much more superior on the Tecsun to the Panasonic. Primarily you have those selectivity options on the Tecsun S8800 that you don't have on the Panasonic, which basically doesn't have any selectivity options. No narrow wide on this receiver. You just take what you can get. Another comparison I'll do between these two radios is All India Radio 9445, usually coming in quite a bit better at this hour of the day. 9445. We're going to first show you what it sounds like on the Panasonic RF-B65. All right, so as you can hear, you can barely make out the announcer on All India Radio. I'm going to turn up the Tecsun and you'll see the comparison. Run through the selectivity stages for you on All India Radio. Now, having demonstrated what appears to be far better sensitivity of the S8800 on that one frequency, which was All India Radio, let's go to a stronger station, which is Brazil on 11780. I've got Brazil set on the RF-B65 and on the Tecsun. First I'm going to show you what Brazil sounds like coming over the RF-B65. So, not so bad actually on the Panasonic. Let's go to the Tecsun. Alright, another station comparison. We're going to go up to 11810, which is the Ascension Island transmitter with BBC. Today it's not doing as well as it does in other days, but let's go up on the Tecsun and give you a comparison with the Panasonic.
Coming up later in the program, on the list of the world's highest homicide rates, Brazil has 7 in the top 20.
All right, we're going to go over to Panasonic now. Notice there is some sensitivity of the Panasonic to the touching the antenna and the position of the radio, but with the right configuration, not a bad signal. Again, the speaker in the Tecsun obviously superior to the Panasonic.
Wherever they are in the world, now the head of the French State International.
And going back to the Tecsun.
Interpol took on missing himself. Chinese national on the way. Is believed to have boarded a flight to China last month. The Chinese wife says she hasn't heard since. A French official said he hadn't.
And one more BBC comparison, the 12095 frequency of BBC, first on the Panasonic.
By the Chinese state, then we noticed that he has not been communicating with anybody for about 2 weeks or so. Since he travels to China,
And over to the Tecsun.
There are no reasons why that should be the case. Would suggest that as reliable enough to be so nominated that perhaps he has some other.
So it's actually something you might notice in that comparison, that the BBC on 12095 is actually at times sounding a little better on the small Panasonic RF-B65 than it is even with selectivity options engaged on the Tecsun. The straight comparison of WWV between these two receivers, first the Tecsun on 15 megahertz, then over to the Panasonic. Another station test I often do when comparing radios is 6070, the shortwave frequency of Toronto. Here you go with the Tecsun receiving 6070 and then over to the Panasonic.
I'm Jay Mike, Seagal Bracing for Ryan Doyle today as we explore the new phenomenon of job ghosting. Not just blowing off your scheduled job interview, but accepting an offer and not actually showing up the first day, even vanishing from an existing position. Thus far as 7-10-10.
So it's an interesting phenomena observed on the Tecsun just now as I was tuned to Toronto in 6070, touching the aerial of the 8800 does reduce quite a bit the signal level, as you can see. Again, there's Toronto 6070. Let's go over to the Panasonic. And back to the Tecsun. Another BBC comparison, 9410 kilohertz, BBC at just after 2030 GMT. Let's hear it first from the Tecsun.
Congolese soldiers, Denis Mukwege, and the Iraqi Yazidi activist Nadia Murad. Both of whom have fought against the use of rape as a weapon of war. The European Commission has delivered an update assessment of the state of the Brexit talks. It's delivered the message.
And let's go over to the RF-B65 and hear it on 9410. And back to the 9410 to the on the Tecsun.
Coming up next, we hear from our news team ahead of presidential elections on Sunday. The first in March.
What we see, just to summarize so far, is the obvious superiority of the Tecsun 8800, and when it comes to the speaker, the selectivity options, obviously, and just the ability to drag out some of the weaker stations that are on the air, whereas the Panasonic is quite a sensitive receiver, but seems to respond slightly better to stations that are slightly higher in level than those that are below a certain threshold. So let's do a couple of other stations here. One is Romania, 11850.
Monday with the award of the Economy Prize in Stockholm. UNESCO estimates that 69 million teachers are still needed around the world in order to reach the education targets set for the year 20.
And go to the Panasonic. It's I'm standing the receiver up because it does seem to receive a little bit better on its whip antenna in the vertical position.
Was on the International Education Day celebrated on Friday in Romania as well. In her message, Prime Minister Viorica Dăncilă said education is a chance for individual development and the foundation of a strong developed country with a voice heard at international
And back to the Tecsun.
In turn, President Klaus Johannes emphasized that the system must provide youth with the skills required in the labor market, including in terms of adjusting.
So there's 11985. Let's tune that in on the Panasonic as well.
Regions in the world.
Les représentants du Japon et de la Russie sont convenus d'un partage des coûts du financement des activités économiques conjointes sur les îles détenues par la Russie et par Tokyo. Une délégation d'une cinquantaine de représentants du gouvernement et du monde des affaires nippon est en visite sur Kunashiri et Etorofu, deux des îles en question. Elle y mène ce qui constitue la troisième étude de ce genre sur le terrain.
Yeah, here's a comparison. 12050, which currently has two stations on the same frequency. On the Tecsun, of course, you have the flexibility of trying sideband on those. Let's try that.
Aprender a conducir con cambio automático. Bueno, eso también un cambio. Allí estuve en comunidad, el parco me recibió de manera hermosa. Muy amable, muy atento.
And let's try this on the Panasonic.
Pays islamique en Syrie et en Irak. L'Iran y est également qualifié d'État le plus...
Lancement la première dame des consultations précédente la suite du 15 à la bourgade de octobre. Le ministre de la Santé publique nous parle de la présomption du cancer. Adissa Mohamed.
Volume up again on the Tecsun.
فاطمة صوتك ليس إنما خارجين عليكم في الدار يجوز يعطوا لكم انتم كأخوات.
It's 12060.
وفي حال ما إذا كان فوقكم هذا
Panasonic doing very nicely there on that comparison.
وجا ولاد وكلاب يجوز.
That's BBC. Let's try that comparison as the signals fade up again.
Friend in the army.
On the Panasonic.
ديون يسلف على الناس هذيك ما تزكيهاش حتى ترجع.
Of a major military operation. In February, the federal government
Back to the Tecsun.
deployed 20,000 soldiers were made available. The second in command of
And back to the Panasonic.
Paulo Pimentel. What happened here in Rio is that for the last 30
So again, on several of these frequencies, what we can see, and my conclusion is that if one has both of these receivers, you're really lucky, and I consider myself to be lucky to have them both for this comparison. If you just have the Panasonic RF-B65, you are doing very, very well. This receiver is as sensitive as any portable gets, even though it's limited in terms of selectivity, and many of the other bells and whistles. This is one killer of a little radio. It stays neck and neck pretty much with the Tecsun, except in some conditions which also depend on moving the receiver itself or altering the position of the telescopic antenna. But what you can see from this comparison is that it stays very, very close to the new technology of the Tecsun S8800. Just another comparison using All India Radio. There are two frequencies for AIR, 9445 and 7550, that are audible here in the east coast of the U.S. Again, the time is now 2045 UTC. You have 94 to 45 fading up very nicely. 7550 is increasing in signal level. Let's do the comparison between these two receivers on both of those frequencies. First, the Tecsun on both 9445 and 7550. 7550 first. I see the Tecsun is struggling a little bit to bring in this 7550, but the signal is definitely there. Let's go to 9445. Let's go back to 7550. (9445). And let's do the Panasonic for 9445.
And that our police are giving the judicial security. Criminals with weapons on the street, they can eliminate.
And Panasonic to 7550. Now that is quite interesting. Using the Panasonic RF-B65, it seems to be doing better receiving the weaker of these two frequencies for All India Radio, the one on 7550 kilohertz. Let's hear that again. There's that interval signal. Let's go to 7550. There's 9445 on the Tecsun. And 7550. Back to the Panasonic. Back to the Tecsun. Back to the Panasonic. So an observation here, and it's an interesting one. The AGC characteristics, at least on these frequencies, as you can compare them, the AGC on the Panasonic seems to be superior, at least receiving this particular station, superior to the Tecsun. Because you'll note that the signal and the audibility in the Tecsun are not as sharp with the fades that are inherent with these frequencies at this hour. And yet on the Panasonic you can hear all India radio on the weaker frequency 7550 quite a lot more easily. Here again is the Panasonic 7550. And now back to the Tecsun. So again, this is the kind of thing that you can only bring out when you're doing these frequency-to-frequency comparisons. You can spend hours and hours writing and reading details of specifications of radios, but it's only when you test frequency-to-frequency, head-to-head, that you can notice aspects like this, where a decades-old technology radio like the RF-B65 can be competitive with and often superior to the Tecsun S8800. And usually Guinea 9650 is coming in more better than it is today, but here's a comparison of the Tecsun and the Panasonic on 9650. First, the Tecsun using a lower bandwidth.
Appel à candidat. Pour la formation au master de l'université, pour l'année universitaire 2018-2019,
and we'll tune that in on the Panasonic.
gestion des recrutements, entretien du commerce international, finance et comptabilité, développement communautaire, juridique, communication, droit des enfants, 2 ans pour sans inclusif, sanctionné par la conférence de l'État public libre, les étudiants diplômés en licence, dans le cadre de secteurs publics et privés, département de licence ou d'un diplôme équivalent. Le dossier de candidature comprend les traitements, la demande de candidature par les apprenants et les recherches de l'université, la sécurité de
And what's interesting here is that the Panasonic is quite competitive with the Tecsun. At Tecsun, you can even hear more of the interference on the Tecsun from 9655, which is a Saudi frequency, I believe. I'm sorry, that's Algeria, the French transmitter carrying Algeria 9655. There's 9650. And you have to go to 2.3 kilohertz on the Tecsun to get rid of that interference, whereas on the Panasonic, Guinea is actually audible fairly well, even detuning 1 kilohertz 9649. There's Algeria 9655 and Guinea, and back to the Tecsun.
Fermez-vous de cette rubrique des avis de communiqué. Ingénieur en génie civil, fermez-moi tout camarade, question spatiaux, selon le fait, transmis par une condition lors de célébration de l'ordre. لازم ما تثبتنا على
So again, in this instance, you have an interesting comparison. Whereas Tecsun is fairly sensitive on 9650, and you can hear Guinea, the rejection is seems to be somewhat inferior on the Tecsun when you're trying to listen to Guinea versus 9655. That strong signal from Algeria. Let's listen on the Panasonic again. Again, there's Guinea in the Panasonic, and we're going to just detune slightly and tune up to Algeria on 9655, and then back to Guinea, and back to the Tecsun to show you the difference.
Encore une page continue donc des avis de communiqué, les familles d'Italie, et l'Italie, également Copain, il a un interview du décès de leur résulté, le docteur Alpha Pascal, directeur de l'université.
So now what I've done here is go into ECSS tuning using lower sideband to clarify the Guinea frequency from Algeria, 9655 above it. And it's doing fairly well, the Tecsun is, in using that tool. But again, going back to just plain AM reception, you can tell that, again, on 9650, much easier on the Panasonic to hear those two stations and separate them than it is on the S8800.